You're listening to Every Day's a Saturday USMC Veteran Podcast.
Now introducing your host of Every Day's a Saturday USMC Veteran, the one-man show, Brian Roof.
Hey, what's going on, friends and family? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you guys are having an amazing day out there. We are at episode 10. I can't believe we've already made 10 of these. This is could be the final one. It depends on if you guys are really enjoying this. You guys can shoot me an email and say, hey, you know what? I would love to see some more of those true crime military edition videos made, and I'll go ahead and continue down making more episodes. But if not, this might be our last one, and we're going to finish it off. Not only one Marine, but two Marines. Can't really say Leonard Lake's name without Charles Ng. So we're going to go ahead and get into our next person here. His name is Leonard Lake. He was born October 29th, 1945. He's also known as Leonard Hill and a variety of other aliases. Once an American serial killer, during the mid-1980s, he and his accomplice, British Hong Kong-born Charles Ng, raped, tortured, and murdered an estimate 11 to 25 victims at a remote cabin near Wilseyville, California, and Sierra Nevada foothills, located 150 miles east of San Francisco. After his 1985 arrest on unrelated charges, Lake swallowed cyanide pills that he had sewn into his clothing and died 4 days later. Human remains, videotapes, and journals found at Lake's cabin later confirmed Ng's involvement and were used to convict Ng on 11 counts of capital murder. All right. So right now with Leonard Lake, he does have an accomplice, and it actually is another Marine. But we're going to go ahead and get into the younger years and him joining the Marine Corps. Leonard Lake was born in San Francisco, California. When he was 6 years old, his parents separated, whereupon he and his siblings moved in with their maternal grandmother. Lake was reportedly a bright child, but after habitually photographing his sister's nude, which his grandmother apparently encouraged, he became obsessed with pornography. He then reportedly extorted his sisters to perform sexual acts. Lake also collected mice and killed them by dissolving them in chemicals. In the same manner, he would later dispose of his human victim's corpse. After attending Balboa High School, Lake enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1964. He served 2 tours of duty in the Vietnam War as a radar electronics technician. During this period, Lake was first diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder. After what was termed a delusional breakdown in Da Nang, he received psychotherapy and in 1971 a medical discharge. Lake settled in San Jose and enrolled at San Jose State University, but dropped out after 1 semester upon becoming enamored of the hippie lifestyle in San Francisco. He moved to commune there and married briefly in 1975. The marriage dissolved after his wife discovered that he was making and appearing in amateur pornographic movies, usually involving bondage or sadomasochism. For the next 8 years, Lake lived in Greenfield Ranch, a 5,600-acre back-to-the-land settlement near Coppella, north of Ukiah, California. There he met and eventually married Claren Balaza, nicknamed Cricket, who became involved in Lake's fantasies and appeared in many of his pornographic films. Lake's growing fear of impending nuclear holocaust prompted him to begin construction of a bunker on the settlement grounds until the owner of the property became aware of the project and ordered it halted. So once again, it's kind of crazy. Here's another killer that we have that we're going through, and he was sent to go live with his grandparents. And in terms of him living with his grandmother, it sounded like she kind of was into him doing things that were inappropriate, and she wasn't really correcting his behavior. He obviously went into the Marine Corps, going into Vietnam, and also had a lot of issues getting out. He was diagnosed schizophrenic. And the thing about it is you don't hear about him getting any type of help of the sort, in which I don't really know if he did or not, but definitely doesn't seem like there was any help given to him, or he sought any kind of help to get himself mentally stable. But we're going to go ahead and talk about how he started getting into murders and how he would eventually run into Charles Ng. Lake met fellow Marine Charles Ng, originally from Hong Kong, in 1980 or 1981. Sources claim the two met through a survivalist magazine advertisement Lake placed. Lake was managing the Philo Motel in Philo, California at the time. Ng had escaped from a military prison following a conviction for weapons theft and stayed at the motel for a time and then moved into a house along with Lake and Balaz. Several witnesses testified that Ng was very subservient and allowed Lake to order him around and speak to him in a condescending, disparaging manner. Ng stated that he looked up to Lake like a brotherly, fatherly figure. In April 1982, police raided the house and arrested Ng and Lake on weapons charges. Ng was returned to Fort Leavenworth to complete his sentence. Lake jumped bail and began life as a fugitive, using various aliases and wearing disguises in an attempt to hide his true identity. In July 1984, Ng was dishonorably discharged after serving time for theft and desertion, and rejoined Lake and Ballas. Ng first stayed in an apartment rented by Lake's sister before moving into an apartment on Lenox Avenue in San Francisco in the fall of 1984. Lake was living in Wilseyville in a cabin owned by Ballas' parents by this time. Next to the cabin, Lake had built a structure described in his journals as a dungeon. Lake had already murdered his own brother, Donald Lake, and a friend, Charles Gunner, stealing their money and identities. All right, so now we get to hear a little bit about Charles Ng. As you can hear, he was struggling in the military, ended up escaping, basically going AWOL, and eventually running into, Leonard Lake. And they would obviously hit it off in a way that they had things in common, being the Marine Corps. And obviously, Charles Ng was already in a position of, being in trouble on the run. So he was already at a level of, he didn't really, he was basically at the mercy of other people. And it sounds like he would eventually kind of jump on Leonard Lake's coattails, so to speak, and start doing things with him. But we're going to go ahead and continue down with the murders part 2. Over the next year, Lake and Ng began a pattern of rape, torture, and murder. Lake and Ng targeted women, but were not hesitant to abduct entire families. After killing the men and children to get them out of the way, Lake would hold the women captive in a custom-built room in the bunker at the ranch, tie them up and torture and rape them, and eventually kill them. Lake allegedly did not allow Ng to enter the rear portion of the bunker, telling him that this is my domain. Lake also lured men to the compound with promises of work, but would instead rob and murder them, after which Lake stole their identities. After killing the victims by shooting them, they would either bury them in shallow graves or near the property, or burn them and scatter their bones. Police found over 40 pounds of burned, crushed bone fragments scattered around the Wilseyville property. Charles Ng was convicted of murdering 11 people, but because of the massive amount of burned, shattered bone fragments found at the cabin, they are thought to have killed as many as 25 people. Lake is known to have committed several murders without the assistance of Ng, and wrote in his journal that Ng was initially very hesitant to get involved with my plan. Known victims include Lake's brother, his best friend, his neighbor, multiple people met through newspaper advertisements, tenants of a boarding house where Lake had rented a room. 2 men had advertised gay sex, one of whom survived, and 2 workmates of Ng. So Leonard Lake and Charles Ng didn't seem like they were seeking out certain types of individuals, so to speak. But it sounds like they would start using their identities, their identification, things of that nature, after they would kill them. So, but other than that, I don't think that they really had any reason to go out and seek some of the people that they killed. But here we go. We're going to listen in. This is when they get arrested, and Leonard Lake decides to take it into his own hands. We'll go ahead and listen in. On June 2nd, 1985, Ng was caught shoplifting a vise from a hardware store in South San Francisco and fled the scene on foot, throwing the vise into the trunk of a brown Honda. Lake attempted to pay for the vise, but by then, police had arrived. Officers noticed that Lake bore no resemblance to the photo on his driver's license, which carried the name of Robin Scott Stapley, a San Diego man reported missing by his family several weeks earlier. Lake was arrested after a gun equipped with a prohibited silencer was found in the trunk of his vehicle, a 1980 Honda Prelude, and was later positively identified via fingerprint search. At the station, Lake was placed in the interrogation room where he was given a pen, paper, and glass of water. A short time later, a detective entered the room to conduct an interview and found Lake violently convulsing on the floor. The notepad contained a brief suicide note. At the hospital, it was determined that he had swallowed cyanide pills and had sewn his clothes. Lake never regained consciousness and died 4 days later on June 6. The license plate on Lake's vehicle was registered to Lonnie Bond, but the VIN on the Honda itself was registered to Paul Costner, who had disappeared from San Francisco in November of 1984. A utility bill found in the Honda led detectives under the command of San Francisco Police Homicide Lieutenant Gerald McCarthy to the property in Wilseyville, where they found Stapley's and Bond's trucks. And the dungeons in a makeshift burial site nearby, police unearthed over 40 pounds of burned and crushed human bone fragments corresponding to a minimum of 11 bodies. So Leonard Lake, at this point in time, you could tell that he always had plans that if he had gotten caught, that he was going to take life in his own hands. And that's basically what he did. He sewn cyanide pills into his actual clothing. Obviously he knew what, shirt or whatever he was going to be wearing if he had gotten caught. So while he was waiting, in the interrogation room, took the pills and he was out. So they really weren't able to get very much from Leonard Lake. And from this point on, we're basically going to be listening in on Charle NG and kind of how everything ended for him, because at this point in time, he's the only one left alive amongst the two. And he's basically going to be taking, the fall for it all at this point in time. And they really don't have anything else other than him. So we're going to go ahead and listen in on the rest and part two. Prodding the ground near the cabin, police noticed loose dirt, leading them to two buried 5-gallon buckets. One contained an assortment of ID papers and personal possessions, suggesting the total victim count could be as high as 25. And the other were Lake's handwritten journals for the years 1983 and 1984, and 2 videotapes. One videotape contained a 20-minute long manifesto recorded on October 23, 1983, in which Lake discusses his plan to build a cell and enslave women. The other tape, labeled M Ladies, documented the torture of Kathleen Allen and Brenda O'Connor in one scene. Lake is heard telling O'Connor that her family is not liked by the neighborhood, to which O'Connor replies, "So we'll leave," and Lake coldly answers, "Oh, you've already left. We've closed you down." NG later tells O'Connor, "You can cry and sob like the rest of them, but it won't do any good. We are pretty cold-hearted, so to speak." In another scene, Allen is seen tied to a bed as Lake tells her, "I'm having a little war within myself between what I want to do, and we might call the decent thing to do. And for the moment, the decent thing to do is winning, so rest." Both Allen and O'Connor were subsequently murdered. Ex-wife Clarence Belez cooperated with investigators and received legal immunity from prosecution. Court records stated that Belez turned over weapons and other material to authorities during the investigation. She was called as a key witness in NG's trial in 1999, yet in a surprise move, NG's lawyer, William Kelly, dismissed Belez without asking any questions. Kelly later declined to explain his actions. Belez was on the witness stand for a few minutes as Kelly read sections of her immunity agreement. Belez had been expected to shed light on what happened inside the mountain cabin and her parents owned and rented to her and Lake. It was later revealed that Belez had removed boxes of papers and videotapes from the Wilseyville cabin in time between Lake's arrest and the initial police search. It's amazing how much stuff they had there at that little cabin and the amounts of bodies and stuff that they found there, in terms, not full contact bodies, but just chopped up and, parts and all kinds of stuff. It was literally a burial ground there. And so I couldn't imagine how they were able to get away in that little area for so long. I guess it was kind of in a remote area, so maybe that's why a lot of people weren't able to see incoming and outgoing traffic and things of that nature. And imagine there was, screaming and yelling and loud noises going on as well. So They definitely had to live somewhat in a remote area to get away with it for so long. We're gonna go ahead and listen in on how Charles Ng eventually gets arrested and put away for the rest of his life. Ng, who had never legally obtained U.S. citizenship, was captured in a department store in Calgary, Alberta, Canada on July 6, 1985. Store security guard suspected Ng of shoplifting, and in the ensuing confrontation, Ng shot the security guard. Though wounded, the security guard was able to disarm and detain Ng until the police arrived. Ng served 4.5 years in the Canadian prison and tried to fight extradition to the United States on the grounds that he would be subject to capital punishment. In 1991, he was extradited to California, where he was indicted on 12 counts of first-degree murder. Despite the video evidence and detailed information in Lake's diaries, Ng maintained he was merely an observer and that Lake planned and committed all of the kidnaps, rapes, and murders unassisted. In February 1999, Ng was convicted of 11 of the 12 homicides, 6 men, 3 women, and 2 male infants. Jurors deadlocked on the 12th charge, the murder of Paul Costner, but Ng was sentenced to death. Presiding judge noted Mr. Ng was not under any duress, nor does the evidence support that he was under the domination of Leonard Lake. As of January 2022, Ng was still incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison. The last execution in California was in 2006. In 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order placing a moratorium on the death penalty in California. All right, so Charles Ng is basically gonna be spending the rest of his life behind bars, and likely he'll die before he gets the execution, especially the way things are going here currently in California. As long as Gavin Newsom's still in charge, they're going to go ahead and probably not have any more lethal injections. So Charles Ng is just going to rot away in jail as he should. And that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this one. Hope you guys are enjoying these. Like I said, if you guys like to keep them going, just shoot me an email. Let me know. Hey, I love these. Let me keep seeing some more true crime military edition. But hey, let's go ahead and talk about a couple things. Hey, make sure we out there checking on our friends, our family, our loved ones, our buddies, our battle buddies. If you need some help, press 988, and then you're just going to press 1, and then you can talk to someone. I believe it's discreet. You don't have to give up any information. I do know that they help out with people. If you need certain resources and things of that nature, they may end up giving you other numbers. But nevertheless, there's a number you can call if you need some help and you don't feel like talking to anybody else. Or, you know what? Shoot me an email. Every day is a Saturday, 365@yahoo.com. I'm always here if you need someone to talk to as well. What else we got going on? Let's talk a little bit about something real fun that I enjoyed doing, but I'm not going to be able to make this one in particular, but Hero Stock at Rolla, Missouri, June 29th. Tell you what, this is one heck of a lineup when it comes to veteran musicians. You got JB Brown Band, who's a Marine. You got Barbara Sim, who's a Marine. You got Derek Stoner, who's Army Special Forces. And you got Shannon Book, who is a Devil Doc. Man, I tell you what, it doesn't get much better. And they're also going to be doing a car show there. So that one's going to be a lot of fun. You're definitely not going to want to miss out on that Hero Stock. And there's other Hero Stocks as well that are going to be in Tennessee and Nebraska as well. But this is going to be the first one of the year. But hey, hope you guys are having an amazing day. You know how I say, don't let the day kick your ass. Make sure you're out there kicking it. Until next time, we'll see y'all